Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Business Growth Club. This is your weekly edition, and in this week's edition, we're going to look at pricing as we continue our pricing series. Now, so far in the pricing series, we've had a look at why pricing is so important to a business, and how I believe that most small businesses are underselling themselves when it comes to prices. Their prices are too low, and how their prices really could increase. We've also seen how much of a key profit driver pricing is, and how just 10% up or down on pricing can make a massive difference on your net profit, the bottom line profits for the business. We've also looked at markup, which is the most popular form of pricing, the cost plus pricing, the percentage markup, and we also looked at if you do use markup pricing, how you must calculate it properly as a small business in order for it to work for you. However, whilst we accept that markup pricing is the most popular strategy, is it the best strategy for your business, or are there some better ways to look at your pricing strategy? Well, today in this edition, we're going to be looking at lots of other pricing strategies to show you that number one, markup pricing is not the only strategy, and number two, some other examples and some other strategies that you're able to use in your business which might just increase your profits, which of course is the whole reason why you listen to the Business Growth Club recordings. So why don't we get started and have a look at the first pricing strategy in today's recording. Okay, the first strategy in today's recording is market skimming or market creaming. Now, this is generally used by product type businesses, and that's because when we're launching a new product, there's often a huge cost of research and development. And not only do we need to recover that cost, we need to recover it quickly. So what we do is we set very high prices with the objective of reducing sales volume, but actually making a higher profit and making it very quickly. So because the price is very high, we won't make as many sales, but we will get more profit and we'll get that cash injection in the business very quickly to recover the research and development costs. So as I say, it's usually a launch strategy. The idea is trend setting amongst what's known as early adopters, people who will set a trend by being the first people to use your product. It's generally then followed by a leveling price reduction. So once you've had high prices, so the kind of the movers and shakers, the people in the industry have said that it's a decent product, you've got decent reviews, you've actually recovered your R&D, sometimes you'll then pick another pricing strategy, usually a lowering price strategy, but it doesn't have to be. There's lots of other strategies you can then employ, other strategies we'll look at in this video. Now, it could also work for a retail business when you're launching a new product line or a new service line. Now, of course, generally, those types of releases are controlled by the factory or the manufacturer, so you haven't got as much control as a retailer, but you can see how this could work. For a trade or service business, it's difficult to see how skimming or creaming could actually work, other than if you launch a truly unique service, which tends to happen more in the product and retail industry. However, if you are launching a product in either of those two industries, then maybe this is something to look at. Okay, so let's have a look at the second strategy. The second strategy is a loss leader. Now, you'll be quite familiar with this because you probably see a lot of supermarkets using what's perceived to be a loss leader. Now, the real theory behind a loss leader literally is a loss leader, not a loss. Now, a lot of small businesses have that loss type strategy. They actually have a discounted first sale, a discounted second sale, a discounted third sale, and they never actually get to making that profit, not the loss. It is literally used as a loss leader. I know that sounds completely obvious, but the number of businesses I see telling me that their first sale is a loss leader, only to have really tight pricing on the second, third, fourth, fifth sale, so we never actually have an upsell or a cross sell or a higher sell. It's a real common problem. It's literally a loss leader. It means that you discount your first product, usually an attractive product, the sort of stuff that people really want to buy, with a view to getting them into the store or onto your mailing list so that you can make in-store or lifetime value orders. So if you're retail or product, you want to get them onto the first step of the ladder so you can then sell them more items, either be it at the point of purchase, so once they're in the store, or they're on your mailing list, or they become a customer so you market to them and you get the second, third and fourth sales which are more profitable. So it's literally a loss leader. Now, the way the supermarkets use it is actually very intelligent. They will reduce the price of milk and bread to get you into the store. Now, if you go to Waitrose because you need some milk and bread, you're not only going to buy milk and bread, you'll also buy some of their other items, which is where they make their real profit. So it's literally a loss leader to get you into the store. So make sure you follow that example and not a loss, loss, loss. It works very well if you're the type of business that gives away something for free or on a trial basis or a very discounted basis so that people can try before they buy and then start to buy other stuff from you once you've built up trust and once you've built up a relationship. Now, this works very well when you combine it with some of the strategies I've already talked about. Remember, I talk about the sales funnel, so that we get people into our sales funnel by a very cheap or a free offer or a free trial or a very discounted first sale, just so we can get them into our pipeline. It might even be a free report or a free video or something like this. So we get them into our pipeline, we keep marketing to them, and then we can sell them our higher value products. Many of you will have joined this Business Growth Club on the basis that I may have offered you a free copy of one of my books, or one of my video programs, or you came to one of my seminars, or you're on my mailing list, and I've given you lots of information for free. Obviously, that's free to you, but it costs me a lot of money. Producing video products, or giving away free copies of books that I could otherwise sell, or running discounted or free seminars is a cost to me. But I see it as a loss leader to get you onto the system, so I can allow you to try before you buy, and then you kind of come on board and you're listening to this video and you become a profitable customer. So you can see how it works, and that's a loss leader. But never ever confuse loss leading with having a cheap first purchase just to get people on board to sell them cheaper and cheaper items. It's not a discounting strategy. It's a discounted first sale to get long-term value. Market-led pricing is when the prices are set on the basis of market research. Now, when I say market research, I don't mean sitting down your parents or your significant other or your friends down the pub and saying, how much would you pay for X product or X service? I mean real market research. That could be focus groups when you get a room full of your potential customers, or your existing customers if you're looking at adapting your product or launching a new product and seeing how much they would pay and what extra features would they like. If you do run focus groups like that, it's quite important to get your target market in the room. It's also quite important to get that chaired by somebody else and don't do it yourself, because you tend to bias the process. Very few businesses go through focus groups. They are very powerful. And you wouldn't see a major manufacturer launching a product without focus grouping, so why shouldn't a smaller business? And they're much cheaper than you'd ever imagine. I've run focus groups of lots of people, giving people £25 for attending, or a £25 voucher for something, or even doing it for free when you do it the kind of the curbside, as it's known, when you stop passers-by. So it doesn't have to be an expensive process, but it is a very valuable process. Of course, competitor analysis also allows you to see what other people are charging, and then you can determine your strategy as to whether you want to position yourself upwards or downwards. That doesn't mean you're always undercutting your competition. You could undercut them, but you could also go above them in the pricing. So that's market-led pricing on the basis of real market research. When you say, how much are people prepared to pay for our products? Well, we'll ask people through focus grouping, or we'll look at our competitors. We'll see what price is set by the market, hence the market research. What the market is telling us people want to buy. It's a very old-fashioned model based on kind of old-fashioned economics, if you will, which maybe aren't as applicable to the online world where price comparison is easier and people tend to shop in a slightly different way. But it's still a model that a lot of people could use, and it's still probably much better than markup, which is very much based on the percentage uplift you want to make on your pricing. So that's market-led pricing. Market penetration, you may have heard of this, and a lot of businesses tell me they follow this strategy, is when you set lower prices to gain market share. So it's almost the opposite of a creaming strategy we talked about before. You have low prices to gain market share, so trendsetters and early adopters have your product, and then you can progressively increase the price once you gain market share. However, I did say that lots of businesses tell me have this strategy, but respectfully, most businesses don't understand this strategy because it only works on two assumptions. The first assumption is it's a short-term strategy. You give out low pricing to pull people in, either to get first term sales or to get trends set so that you then become a go-to place and you have an established reputation so people come back time and again. That's assumption number one. Long-term strategy, not short-term strategy. Number two, it's only suitable for people who want major market share. Now, the vast majority of small business owners that I know are not looking for market share. They're not looking for, say 10,000 people to use their products or their services. They're looking at maybe 50 to 1,000 people every year using their products or services. Now, if that's the sort of numbers you're talking about, unless you have an absolute micro niche, then you're never going to get market share. So market penetration doesn't work because you're not Apple launching a new iPhone. Not that Apple follow this strategy, interestingly, but even if they were to have lower prices just to get some trend set, then they were doing that because they're trying to dominate a marketplace. Most small businesses aren't trying to dominate a marketplace. So when people say, I'm setting lower prices so people hear about it, you've got to say, are you looking for major market share? And are you using this as a short-term strategy? Otherwise, it just won't work for your business. So be very careful when using market penetration. Now, discrimination pricing is sometimes called by a lot of people niche pricing. And it's quite controversial, really, because it says that we will set different prices for different market segments. And we set those prices on their willingness to pay or their perceived price sensitivity. So we might say, for instance, and this is very common, that we will charge businesses more than the domestic market because we believe that businesses will pay more. Or one step further, we might say that we perceive that certain types of businesses will pay more than other businesses. So you might say that dentists, for instance, will pay more than plumbers because you perceive that they've got more income or you perceive that they're less price sensitive. I'm not saying they are, by the way. I'm saying it's a common assumption people make. So you say dentists will pay more, so I will charge more. Or you can say different age groups. So old age pensioners or students, you might say they don't pay as much, so we'll give them a student discount. Now, this is very rife in economics. You'll often go to the cinema and you will see that it will be a cheap price for students and old age pensioners, and you believe that they're being altruistic. They're not at all. It's a basic economic principle which tells us that we should set the price at what people are willing to pay and can afford to pay. Now, students and older people don't have as much money, naturally, so actually we'll give them a price so we can get them in and we don't turn away their custom. So don't believe it's something that's egalitarian. It isn't at all. It's just a strategy to maximize sales. So we say different people at different ages. We sometimes see it with different genders as well. We've sometimes said when it comes to hobby businesses, so that is businesses that sell hobby items, say fishing items, that women will pay less than men. And that's just a generic finding. For men's hobbies, they will pay more than women's hobbies. So we set prices higher for men's fishing gear than for women's fishing gear. Another common area is affluence. If we perceive that somebody has more money, we perceive that they will pay more because they're less price sensitive. Now, there are all manner of different determinants, different demographics on which you can base your discrimination pricing. But it is a very advanced form of pricing. As I said, it's slightly controversial because it says I'm not going to have a one-size-fits-all pricing. I'm going to say, based on certain demographics, I will pay more. Now, you're very familiar with this yourself because when you come off the motorway because you need fuel and you go to the services, you'll see that they'll charge you £1.50 a litre, not £1.35, which you may get at the local garage. But they know, based on discrimination pricing, that you need to purchase it there and then. So you fall into the discrimination of paying higher, not less. Even garages of the same brand of, say, BP or something, will actually sell their fuel at different prices for different areas of the country based on how wealthy they believe the population is or how price sensitive they are. So everybody is very familiar with discrimination pricing. So whilst it may be slightly controversial, it's very widely used and it can be a very powerful strategy for a business. So that's discrimination pricing. Now, premium pricing, this is sometimes called guru pricing or luxury pricing, is very intelligent, and I don't know why more businesses don't use this as a strategy. It's based on this idea that people say you get what you pay for, and that's not always true. It's not always a justifiable notion, but people have that idea in their head, so we tap into that, so we keep our prices very high on the basis of we're trying to tell people it's a luxury item, so it's not cheap, but you get what you pay for, so it's worth having the luxury. And it's a very successful strategy. We're all familiar with this strategy. You will all have heard of Rolex watches. Now, Rolex watches are very expensive. Do you really believe that Rolex do markup pricing? Or it's cost us £500 to create this Rolex, so we'll have a 100% markup and we'll sell it for £1,000 or something. Of course they don't do that. They do premium pricing. They price their watches, which probably are very high quality, but they charge their watches and price them very high, so that they have the luxury factor. Now, if I told you that Rolex was selling their watches for half price, what would your reaction be? Now, Rolex might see a short-term increase in sales whilst people try to buy up a luxury item cheap. In the long run, they would lose market sustainability because people would no longer want to buy a Rolex because it wasn't perceived as a luxury and it wasn't perceived as being the best around, or even it wasn't as seen as the most expensive watch to have on your arm, so you've got to have it. You see, their pricing is based on that premium, and you perceive it to be a premium. Now, it's interesting because when you actually set something at premium and you believe it's a luxury, something else happens. You allow yourself to actually create a luxury item, because Rolex can afford to spend an extra couple of £100 on every watch to make it absolutely brilliant, because their profit margins are so incredibly high. Now, any business can adopt this model. There's a lot you need to do around your branding to achieve luxury branding and premium branding, so you actually look consistent with a premium brand. But fundamentally, any business can do this, and you can set your prices very high because people will say, I'll get what I pay for, and that's fair, so I'm going to get a luxury item, and you can afford to create a luxury item because your margins are so high. So it's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, really. If I asked you the question that I've met a strategist who's £500 an hour, or an absolutely amazing business strategist, and you were struggling in your business, would you use them? Well, some of you would and some of you wouldn't, but you might just give it a try because you say £500 an hour, that's so expensive, they must be good. Now, whether or not you would write a cheque for £500 an hour or not is a bit of an irrelevance. You know that you've had a slight psychological reaction and you thought, that person must be good. So it is a strategy we're all quite familiar with. And for a small business, especially a service sector or a trade business, that can afford to actually make a luxury item and provide a premium service, then it's definitely something that you can consider in your business. The next strategy is aggressive pricing, and I want you to listen to this very carefully because it might just change your business strategy. Aggressive pricing is when you undercut your competitors' pricing in order to gain market share. And an awful lot of businesses do this. They say, I'll undercut my competitors, I'll undercut the market so that I get more people coming to me. However, this only ever works on the basis of very high sales volume. It can't work unless you're going to sell literally thousands of items, or even if it's an expensive item, hundreds of items. Now, you also need very high cash flow because you need to get the production and the labour and the products out the door before you get paid. And you also need a very high marketing strategy because whilst you might say you're going to undercut the market, ask yourself, if you undercut the market, how are you going to tell the market that you've undercut the market? They're not just going to find you because you're cheap. You've got to do marketing, which is naturally has a cost associated with it. It's naturally expensive initially before you get that return on investment. So if you look at this undercutting strategy, which an awful lot of businesses use, it's very complicated. You've got to sell such a high volume. You've got to have great cash flow to absorb this, and you've got to have a huge marketing budget. Very, very risky strategy. I would say that aggressive pricing can only work for very major companies that really can say, we're going to have market share and we're actually going to go out there and try and really undercut the market. For a small business, I really don't see this as a strategy, even if you've only just started your business. I think if you've only just started your business, premium pricing or discrimination pricing would make a lot more sense than undercutting the market, becoming incredibly busy, tying up all your cash flow, and then actually not returning in a profit because you didn't sell a sufficient enough volume and you're caught in a terrible vicious cycle of no cash to invest in the business and very price sensitive customers who want everything very low price. So be extremely careful before you engage in aggressive pricing. It really could be a terrible business mistake. And if you are doing undercutting now, I'd really listen to this video very carefully and wonder, is there a better form of pricing for your business? Okay, the next idea is psychological pricing. Now, this isn't a strategy on its own. You can use psychological pricing in conjunction with any other strategy, but it's basically based on the psychology of the buyer. So you all know that when you go to the supermarket or you go to the electronics shop or whatever, they don't tell you it's going to cost £100. They say £95 or £99. Or if you go and buy a bag of sweets at the shop, they'll say it's 99p, not a pound. Now that's the idea that you perceive 99p or 95p as less than a pound. Now there's very little support for this anymore. Most people who study this actually find that we're all too used to it. And actually, I try this one with you when you're next in the supermarket. Pick up whatever you want to buy and ask somebody how much it is, and they'll look at the price label, and if it's 95p or 99p, they'll tell you it's a pound. So people are naturally sort of rounding it up in their head. You know, the next time you're in your supermarket, try that one with somebody, and I'm pretty sure they'll round it up themselves. So it doesn't really work. We do know that prices ending in 7, and nobody really knows why, but it's just one of these facts that we find, actually work a little bit better. So if you were going to sell an item for about £50, we believe £47 will work a little bit better. As I say, nobody quite knows why that works, but it's quite a consistent finding. However, a more advanced strategy, and this works very well for product businesses, retail businesses, trade businesses, lesser service businesses, but for those businesses is when you have a very exact price. So let's say you sit down with somebody and you're a plumber, and you explain what you do, and you say that you have a pricing matrix, and you tot everything up on a calculator, and you say it's going to be £127.52p. And when they say, oh, that's a very exact price, and you say, yes, well, it's based on very fair pricing, and we've got a pricing matrix, people might just accept it and say, well, that must be right, because it's a very exact number. Of course, there's no evidence to support that, but it looks a very precise number, and it looks as if you're being very fair because you're adding just a reasonable markup, or there's just a psychological process that your buyer goes through when they say it's £127.52. Oh, well, that sounds right, because, you know, it's a very exact price. Again, this is based on psychology, and with a lot of things in psychology, this is very common. We can discover what happens, and we can discover social trends. We can't always explain why. So I can't necessarily explain why these work, but they do work in your business, and you've got nothing to really lose by experimenting with it. So you could experiment with prices ending in 7, or some very exact pricing, and just see how it works for your business. You can't really go wrong, but you might gain something. Dynamic pricing, sometimes known as informational pricing, is very intelligent, and it's just become so much more popular with technology and online marketing. It's when prices are set as high as possible based on known demographics about the buyer. So that might be demographics based on past purchases, location, or demographics. So we might know that people in Scunthorpe will pay less for their petrol than people in Surrey, so we change our pricing. Or it might be that we know that a certain type of customer who's bought from us before, say they've bought product number 10, will actually buy product number 20 for a higher price because we've experimented with our pricing from different customer demographics. So essentially we figure out what's the most we can possibly charge based on dynamic pricing information. A very popular example, and Amazon have now stopped doing this because it was too controversial, was they actually recorded via the cookies they use on your computer your buying behavior, and they figured out the type of customer you were based on your past purchases, what items you looked at, and all of this sort of stuff. They built up very intelligent dynamic information, so they knew who would buy for a high price or a low price. So certain people might be categorized as being a high price purchaser. It's generally people who buy lots of items and they don't really shop around, and they just click on the link and they don't put it on a waiting list, but they buy it straight away. Essentially, they'd figured out through dynamic information what people were willing to pay. And then they said, right, for some people, I'm going to sell this book for £10, other people £6. Because people who aren't price sensitive, I'll raise the prices. People who are price sensitive, I'll decrease the prices. Now, obviously, you need some quite intelligent information to do this, to make dynamic pricing work. But I'll give you an example which is very powerful that any business can use. I've experimented with different keywords. Remember, I've talked before about keyword research, and you might drive people to your website based on, let's just use 2 fictitious search terms. Let's look at small business marketing and cost-effective marketing. Okay, and I might experiment with pricing and know that the people who come to my website based on small business marketing will buy a marketing course for £500, but people searching for cost-effective marketing might only pay £200. Now I know this information because I may have split test the pricing so that for the same keyword small business marketing, I've tried to sell at £500, £1,000, £2,000, £200, and I've seen the premium price based on conversion and the profitability. I've also done the same for cost-effective marketing, and I found that people are more price sensitive. Now, I've used that example because it's quite obvious that if someone was searching for small business marketing or cost-effective marketing might be more price sensitive. I don't know if that's true, by the way. I'm just using a fictitious example that kind of makes sense. But I have experimented with this myself and with other people, and we've found that certain keywords produce more price sensitive or less price sensitive customers. So actually, if I'm working on 10 different keywords, I might have different prices for the same product across all of those keywords. So it is quite an advanced strategy, and it's quite controversial, but it can be very powerful for a business, and it can mean that you essentially, based on dynamic information, make sure that every single sale is maximally profitable, which is a huge effect for your business. It's often been said that everybody on a plane has paid a different price for their ticket because the airline industry has become so advanced at this dynamic pricing, and they've actually figured out such an intelligent way of computing your price sensitivity and selling at the maximum price. So there may be 100 people on a flight and they've all paid a different price. So you can see if you do invest in the technology, this can be highly powerful. Controversial, but very powerful. Target pricing is something which I'm very, very fond of, and I recommend this to an awful lot of small businesses. And I'll sit down with them and I'll ask them a couple of questions. I'll say, how much does it cost to produce this item based on projected sales? So we reckon we can sell 100 items a year. So based on that, we absorb our direct costs and our indirect costs, like we did in the other pricing video, and we find out the cost, the raw cost of the item. Then we look at how much profit do we want to make. So somebody might say to me, I want to make £50,000 a year profit. And then you determine the price. So following on from that example, if we wanted to make 50k and we knew that we could produce the items for £500 per unit based on our anticipated sales volume, then we set the price in order to make that 50k. So in this example, we'll set the price at £1,000 because we're going to sell 100 items, so 1,000 times 100 is 100,000. It's going to cost us £500 an item, times 100, that's 50,000. So we have £100,000 coming in, £50,000 in costs, gives us a net profit of 50,000. So it's target pricing. We wanted to make 50,000, so we just figured out how many units we would sell, what are the costs involved, we set our price to make that profit. Now it makes perfect sense because an awful lot of business owners have got an idea in their head of how much money they want to make. I'll regularly sit down with business owners when I start working with them, and I'll say, how much profit would you want to make? It's generally more than they're currently making, but they'll give me a number. And I'll say, well, let's just do target costing. And then the price will come out, and it might be a little bit more than they're currently charging, but actually it makes sense, and we still believe it's a fair price. And you'd be surprised when you do target costing, even if it does increase your prices quite a bit. Because you know that if you make the 100 sales, you're going to make that desired income, and the maths work, you're actually very motivated to make it work. So target pricing is really successful. It's really easy to do, and it's just common sense. I want to make this amount of money out of my business. Hey, I'm the business owner. I make my own rules. I'm going to figure out how much I can sell, the costs involved, and I will target my pricing to give me the income that I believe I deserve from running the business. So it's a very good pricing strategy. A lot of businesses could use this better than markup pricing. Decoy pricing is very good. I'm a real fan of decoy pricing, especially for service sector businesses or product businesses where there's multiple products. Now, basically, you use comparative pricing to set a higher price of the end item so that people buy the middle item. So your luxury items are very high, so people go, oh, I can't afford that. So then you give them the middle price product and they say, that's much better, that's more like it. A very common example is a gold, silver and bronze product, and you want people to buy the silver product. So you make the bronze look pretty rubbish value for money, you make the silver look brilliant value for money, and then you make the gold really expensive, and actually you don't really add very much. So naturally I'm looking at three options and I'm saying, well, the gold is high priced and I'm not getting very much more than the silver, but the silver is much better than the bronze because that's a bit of a rubbish package, so I'll go for the silver package. Now, it's decoy pricing because if I just presented the silver pricing, there'd be nothing to distract me to believe that that's a high or a low or a medium price. But because I've used a bit of decoy and I've used a bit of psychology and I've added a very expensive item and a rubbish value for money item, naturally you go, well, silver, that's got to be for me. And if you do this sensitively and you give your prospects the choice between silver, bronze and gold, and they pick the silver because that's what you want them to buy, but they're empowered because they feel like they've got a choice, it can work very well. Now you could always try selling them the gold item first, and if that doesn't work, you give them the silver option or the bronze option. So what happens is you show them an item, and they just might buy at a really high price. You've made a really great sale. If they don't, then you give them some cheaper alternatives that look better value for money. I've known quite a lot of people do this, and they present people with the gold option, and people buy the luxury item, which comes as a real big surprise to them. So you can actually use it that way if you want. So try going for gold first and see what happens. But that's decoy pricing. It works brilliantly for service sector businesses. I'd always have a gold, silver, and bronze, and price it like that. It can be very powerful for a business. Okay, value-based pricing is incredibly simple. It's a little like premium pricing, but it's a bit more intelligent. It basically says, I'm going to set my prices purely on the perceived value to the customer, or the perceived value to myself. So what am I worth, or what is the service worth? And I believe that it's worth £1,000. So I'll charge £1,000 for it, irrespective of the costs. Now, obviously, you're going to set the price higher than what your costs are, otherwise you'd be selling it at a loss, and that would be incredibly stupid. But fundamentally, you actually price up your products quite high because you believe it's a high value service. Now, a common example of this could be somebody like a hypnotherapist who works with people to get rid of a phobia such as spiders, or helps people be more confident, or encourages them to stop smoking. Now, it's very difficult to price a service like that because there aren't really very many costs to be a hypnotherapist, and you probably need a treatment room, and that's kind of about it, isn't it? It's a very difficult service. You can't really use cost plus pricing because your pricing is so low. But if I was to stop somebody smoking through hypnotherapy, well, that's going to have a massive value to somebody's life. So I might say it's worth £3,000 to stop smoking. Even if my costs are just a few £100s a month to hire a room, I believe it's a really valuable product. So I price it at £3,000 because that's what it's worth, that's what I'm worth, and that's what it's worth to the customer. Now, don't discount this or rule this out as a pricing strategy. It can be very effective. I see an awful lot of service sector businesses particularly using this and saying, that's just what I'm worth. That's what the customer's willing to pay. So I'm going to charge that. And you can see from the hypnotherapy example how well that could work. So don't rule out value-based pricing. It can be powerful. Now, this is a funny type, this one, the pay what you want pricing. As the name suggests, you invite people to pay what they want or what they believe is fair. Now, this is generally used for new products and market entrants, but it can still be very effective, and I've actually seen it used in other examples. I had a client who, they were a wedding band, and what they actually did was they said to people, well, pay us what you believe is fair at the end of the evening. Now, obviously, weddings are quite emotional occasions, and they happen to be incredibly good. So when it got to the end of the evening, people decided to pay them a lot more than they ever would have done. Or they'll often say to them, well, what's your normal price because you're absolutely brilliant? And you can give them a high price that you believe is fair. But if you give them that price at the beginning, they may have been less willing to pay. But once they've tasted your goods and they thought, this is absolutely brilliant, the best wedding band I've ever heard, then of course the pricing will go up. So it's a kind of novel strategy, but it's becoming more popular. And it is still powerful. I've seen this work very well, especially for new products and new market entrants, just to get yourself established, especially if you're good. So it's just a quirky way of pricing, but it can be successful. It's also linked to one of my favourite type of pricing, especially for service sector, which is you pay half now and half later. And that works very well because it reduces resistance. And if you know you're very good at what you do, you can do it brilliantly. So for instance, I might sell a £10,000 program, and I say it's £10,000 today, and another £10,000 becomes due when you've made an extra 100k in profit. Now, not only does that become a psychological sale, because people say, this person's prepared to leave half of their price on the table until I make the increase in profits which you've promised me through the program. It also allows me to essentially double the pricing, because really, the guaranteed price is £10,000 and I may get an additional £10,000. I run a program which is a double your profits program, where I'll use a similar strategy to this, so people pay X amount on an ongoing basis, and then when we double the profits, you can actually then pay the remaining balance. I tried that for a while and it worked very well. I've actually reversed that slightly now and I just give a money back guarantee. So it's the full price, but if I don't manage to double the profits, there's a guarantee because we just know that we will do it on that program. So there's no risk. But for a while, using this half now, half later strategy worked very well. So if you're a service sector business or something like a rare business like a wedding band, as I've used that example, then this can work very well. So that's pay what you want pricing, a quirky and interesting way of doing pricing. Now, preloading, it's when you give away a product for free in order to profit from the next orders or the upgrade orders. The classic example is a Gillette razor. They will give you the razor for free, or they used to at least, so that you'll then buy the razor blades. Now, a razor isn't very valuable because you'll probably have one that lasts you 5 or 10 years, but you need to replace the razor blades all the time. So you can actually give away somebody an item so that they have a dependency on you. It works very well. You sometimes see this with software products where they'll give away the product for free, but then there's an upgrade. So Acrobat Reader might say that you can do the reader for free, but if you want to write PDFs, you have to pay a premium price for the product. So they've made the whole world have the ability to read PDFs for free, but then you have to pay a bit of money to create them. Very clever business model. As I say, it's used less now than it ever was, but with online marketing and online products, you can really make this work for your business. So could you give something away for free on the idea that people need to keep coming back time and time again to have those repeat orders or the top-up orders or the upgrades, and how could that work? So we've looked at quite a lot of strategies there, and hopefully what I've illustrated to you is that whilst most small businesses use markup, it's not necessarily the best strategy, and there are so many other strategies there. Obviously I can't say which one's my favourite, because it totally depends on your business model. But I am saying to you, don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to set your prices and know that it's about maximizing your profits, because that's what you deserve in your business. And I would say, my best piece of advice to you is set a price which you believe is fair, which you believe your customers will pay, and don't necessarily get obsessed with a percentage markup or something like this. So many strategies for you to choose from, and this is how you can apply them in your business. So I hope this recording has been useful. I hope it's been illuminating to the different pricing strategies, and I hope you'll go away and start to experiment with your pricing and be more experimental and just see if you can't grow your business by being a little bit more lateral. So you'll receive another recording in a week's time, but until then, thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.